time. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chef Andre. Good to see you. Now in its fourth month, Russian President Vladimir Putin's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine has taken a devastating toll on the Ukraine people. This unjust war of aggression has resulted in the tragic loss of thousands of innocent lives and precipitated a grave humanitarian crisis that is already having cascading effects in areas of the world far beyond Ukraine's borders, such as Syria, Yemen, and Somalia. Nearly 14 million people, roughly 1/3 of Ukraine's entire population, have been forcibly displaced from their homes during more than 100 days of war. The United Nations Office of High Commissioner for Refugees reports that we are witnessing, quote, the largest displacement crisis in the world today, with over 7 million people displaced within Ukraine and more than 6.5 million refugees fleeing to Poland, Romania, and Moldova and other neighboring countries. Within Ukraine, UNHCR estimates that 15.7 million people urgently require humanitarian assistance, including food, water, medicine, and hygienic supplies. An estimated 1 in 3 Ukrainian households is currently food insecure. And thanks to the extraordinary work of international humanitarian organizations such as World Central Kitchen, Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children, the International Rescue Committee, and Samaritan's Purse, and aid is fortunately making its way into Ukraine. That task is complicated, however, and made more dangerous by indiscriminate violence and shelling of civilian areas and key infrastructure nodes. As Russia shifts its military objectives towards eastern Ukraine, the international humanitarian community may only be beginning to understand the full extent of destruction and suffering the Russian military has left in their wake. The deteriorating humanitarian conditions in Ukraine have also had a compounding impact on Ukrainian women and girls who faced a heightened risk of sexual exploitation and conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence. In March, I had the honor to lead a bipartisan delegation to Poland, Romania, and Moldova, and multiple Ukrainian border points to conduct oversight of the delivery of U.S. and international security and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. And we had the opportunity to observe firsthand the generosity of the Polish, Romanian, and Moldovan people who have welcomed Ukrainian refugees into their homes. Our meeting with Ukrainian and other Eastern European officials and civil society organizations repeatedly underscored that absent continued assistance from the international community, our ability to provide relief and support services for the people of Ukraine may soon reach capacity. Our delegation also visited a World Central Kitchen relief site located near Przemysl border crossing on the Polish-Ukraine border, where Chef Jose Andres and his colleague are preparing and distributing as many as 100,000 meals per day to Ukrainian families in need. In steadfast and continued support of the Ukrainian people, the United States Congress recently enacted a bipartisan aid package to provide $40 billion in security and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. I'm grateful that the legislation included $9 billion in direct economic assistance for Ukraine, as well as additional funding for refugee support programs and global emergency food relief. I also commend President Biden and his administration for leading the world in near unanimous solidarity with the people of Ukraine and mobilizing an unprecedented humanitarian response to the conflict. I will look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about their experience and of their organization's experience on the ground in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and whether there are ways the international humanitarian response can be improved. Before I conclude, I'd like to personally thank our witnesses for their testimony today, and more importantly, for the truly heroic work they and their organizations are doing, not only in Ukraine, but around the world. With that, I will now yield to the distinguished ranking member of our subcommittee, Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin.
Thank you. First of all, Chairman Lynch, I'd like to thank you for holding this hearing. And I'd like to thank our witnesses for showing up today, virtually anyway, that are virtually with us today. I know that each of you has devoted a significant amount of your time to assisting not only the Ukrainians impacted by Russia's aggression, but also the Poles, Romanians, Moldovans, and others that have stepped up to help those fleeing the war. And if I'm not mistaken, each one of you has visited Ukraine since the war began. You have our utmost gratitude for this tireless and sometimes thankless work. We've surpassed 100 days of Russia's war on Ukraine, a war that was predicted to last 72 hours. Weapons and military equipment are essential, but without food, clean drinking water, and medical supplies, the Ukrainians would be in a much worse position than they are today. The will and fight of Ukrainians is bolstered by much of the work that we will discuss here today. Congress has appropriated billions of dollars towards humanitarian assistance, but groups like those here today fill the gaps. You know where the assistance is needed, you know the delivery routes, and you know the local people. This knowledge is essential. You all are not only fighting to get aid where it is needed, but you are truly on the front lines of the fight. Russia is afraid of you because of what you stand for: freedom. Russia has attacked humanitarian corridors and used ceasefire negotiations as a tool to kill civilians. They have attacked fleeing refugees. They've attacked hospitals and medical centers. And they have deliberately targeted humanitarian sites, including one of Chef Andrei's World Central Kitchen restaurants in Kharkiv. The United Nations now estimates the civilian death toll to have surpassed 4,000, but there's no doubt this is an undercount. Russia and President Putin have and continue to commit war crimes. I applaud your hard work and urge you to continue supporting Ukraine and its neighboring nations. Whenever this war finally ends, and we all hope it is soon, the fight will not be over. Ukraine will need all of our help to rebuild and restore. I look forward to hearing your stories and how we can further facilitate your efforts. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Now I'd like to recognize the full committee chairwoman, the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney, for a brief opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for your continued focus on the humanitarian crisis in Eastern Europe that Vladimir Putin has caused with his illegal and brutal war against Ukraine. For more than 3 months, Russian forces have carried out a campaign of terror against the Ukrainian people. They have indiscriminately targeted and killed thousands of innocent civilians, destroyed Ukrainian schools and hospitals, brought Ukraine's farmlands to ruin, and decimated entire cities. Throughout it all, the Ukrainian people, led by President Zelensky and with the support of the United States and our allies, have stood strong against Putin's aggression. Even so, the war has had devastating humanitarian impacts and left many Ukrainians without access to food, water, fuel, shelter, and medical care. Suffering most acutely are the innocent families, women, and children of Ukraine who have become targets in Putin's war. Already, the United Nations has confirmed that thousands of women and children have been killed or wounded during the Russian assault. Tragically, the true number is likely significantly higher. Credible reports have also found that Russian troops in Ukraine have engaged in serious war crimes, including revenge killings, mass murders, and sexual violence against women. 5 months ago, the people of Ukraine were going about their daily lives, working, going to cafes and restaurants, and coming home at night to tuck their children into bed. Today, those same families are living through a much harsher reality, one they likely will never fully recover from, and many may not survive. Those are the life and death stakes of Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, and why I am grateful that we have a chance today to hear from some of the heroes who are literally on the front lines providing vulnerable communities with the critical life-saving support that they so desperately need. Recent reports indicate that although Vladimir Putin has shifted his military objective to eastern and southern Ukraine, there is still no end to this war in sight. Given everything that the Ukrainian people will need to defend their homeland, I was pleased that Congress was able to come together recently on a bipartisan basis to pass a bill that would provide $40 billion in additional security, economic, and humanitarian aid to respond to the conflict. Moving forward, it will be critical for Congress to work with the Biden administration to efficiently distribute humanitarian aid and continue to unite our allies in support of the Ukrainian people. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how best to use U.S. taxpayer dollars to address Ukraine's most urgent humanitarian needs. Thank you again for your leadership, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady, and we deeply appreciate her leadership on this issue. Now I'd like to introduce our first witnesses. Our first witness today is Mr. Jose Andre, the founder and chief feeding officer of World Central Kitchen. Chef Andre is a renowned chef who founded World Central Kitchen in 2010 to provide food relief to areas that have experienced natural disasters and other crises. Since then, World Central Kitchen has responded around the world to feed communities in need, including Haiti, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, several cities in the United States, and now Ukraine. The witness will be unmuted so that we can now swear in Mr. Andre. Mr. Andre, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and without objection, your written statement will be made part of the record. With that, Chef Andre, you're now recognized for your testimony.
So, Chairman Lynch, Ranking Member Grothman, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for visiting the commercial kitchen we built from scratch near the Polish border during the early days of the war. World Central Kitchen, the nonprofit I founded more than a decade ago, specializes in feeding communities after natural and man-made disasters. We are unique in how we work and the aid we provide. We work with the first urgency of now, because when you are hungry or thirsty, you are hungry or thirsty today, not tomorrow. We believe in the power of food to rebuild lives, communities, and jobs. A plate of food is a plate of hope. A dollar spent locally on feeding is a dollar that multiplies throughout the local economy. Unlike other aid organizations, we buy local food and we trust local people to feed local people with the real-time intelligence, passion, and expertise. That's how Ukrainians are feeding Ukraine with the support of World Central Kitchen. We started serving hot meals one day after the war began at the Poland-Ukraine border, where refugees on foot were fleeing with whatever they could carry. We rapidly extended into Ukraine and across all border crossings not controlled by Russia. At the peak of the refugee flows across the borders, there was not real presence from the UN system. We assumed the big guys will show up in a couple of days, but it took weeks for them to establish any presence. And then I saw empty UNHCR or UNICEF tents with nothing or nobody inside, as children were walking alone across the border with the phone of their mothers printed in the palm of their hands. These children were just left alone at the mercy of good Samaritans. Today, a week after the 100-day mark of this war, we have distributed more than 40 million meals to more than 475 cities in the region. We're working with almost 500 restaurants, food trucks, and catering companies in 8 countries. We have 42 warehouses. In many of them, we make food bags, where more than 30,000 bags a day are distributed on top of the hot meals. Some situations require hot, already cooked meals. While others need ingredients, some people can cook and feed themselves. When you consider all the meals being cooked by World Central Kitchen teams, our partners, and people at home, I believe we're almost doing 1 million meals a day right now. The United States Congress, on behalf of the American people, has been exceptionally generous with providing funding. These funds are vital for the Ukrainian people, as well as the people around the world who rely on Ukraine's farmers. However, I must tell you that your work is not done, is never done. There are structural reasons why establishing international aid groups took so long to have a presence in Ukraine. Those reasons will not change with billions of dollars. Large quantities of unwanted food are being delivered today with little regard for what the people of Ukraine can or want to eat. There is only so much dry pasta an Ukrainian family needs. We have tried repeatedly to work with the World Food Program, but the UN teams remain way too often outside Ukraine for weeks and weeks instead of activating local teams inside the country. With boots on the ground, we know exactly where the need is. We talk to the community every day. We work next to the community. I am afraid that we are even at risk of duplicating efforts and spending and throwing money at the problem. Let's be clear. Ukraine can feed itself, but they are at war. Millions are displaced. Infrastructure is damaged. Bridges and roads are damaged. Electricity outages. What World Central Kitchen does is helping reestablish in an emergency the system of food flows. We buy local when we can, all the time. It's telling that World Food Program is bringing food into Ukraine, when at the same time, World Food Program is saying it needs food to export from Ukraine to feed other countries. It doesn't make sense. When you don't have real boots on the ground, your decisions are often not the right ones. The current system just does not work when people are starving and thirsty in a crisis. We need a more agile and effective system to deliver it. That means reforming approval processes, cutting red tape, and rethinking contracting rules. I hope you and your staff will work with us on changes that can address these concerns. USAID has an incredible mission dedicated staff. They can be even more effective with some additional authorities and flexibilities to act much more quickly. Thank you for your time and attention and including me in this very important hearing. I look forward now to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chef. That was very, very instructive. And that's exactly the type of information we want to hear. We see all the good work, but behind the scenes, we don't have to grapple with the bureaucratic difficulties that you've just described. So let me just say I'm not surprised because of the, I think the situation here is extraordinary and we were not prepared for it. However, with your help, with the help of the private sector, with the advice of people who are actually doing the work, I think we can make the adjustments that you recommend. Chef Andre, I did lead as you noted, I did lead a bipartisan congressional delegation to Poland, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and I'm thankful for the participation of my Republican colleagues. We went to Moldova, Poland, and Romania to observe the refugee situation in the region since the Russians launched its invasion earlier this year. While in Poland, we did have the opportunity and pleasure of visiting one of your World Central Kitchen meal preparation sites in Przemysl, near the Ukrainian border. Your staff, including Jason Kolis and Anna Bornstein, were gracious and took the time to show us the mechanics about how the logistics were working there to get the ingredients in, to prepare them, and then to, in some cases, ship them in to Ukraine. In other cases, take care of people who were fleeing that country, that war zone. All of us were impressed by the dedication of your organization and World Central Kitchen's employees and volunteers. I want to thank you for your staff for all of the efforts to serve and feed the people of Ukraine. It really is heroic. Chef Andre, you and your team have spent a significant amount of time in Ukraine since Russia began the invasion in February. In your testimony, you stated, quote, that with our boots on the ground, we know exactly where the need is in Ukraine. I want to tap into that a little bit on the ground knowledge. Can you describe some of what you've seen in your time in Ukraine, and what has struck you most about the conflict and the difficulty that we're experiencing in getting meals, getting food to the Ukrainian people, and getting the food that they need? That's the important part. Can you drill down on that a bit? It might help us in making recommendations to the agencies that are making those decisions.
Thank you. Right now, we are serving different realities in Ukraine, and it's not one plan that solves the different situations. Let's see if I'm able to explain myself. We are, you mentioned that is over 12, 13 million people between refugees and displaced people within Ukraine, with so many people out of their cities, out of their workplaces, out of their cities. One of the main problems is that the normal social functions of the economy are broken. So it's very important that emergency means that we are there coming from the outside as people are fleeing the war, that organizations like ours will go to try to repair temporarily those systems of distribution. I always say that we are not really cooks. What we are is people that try to put the logistics and the distribution so people get the access they need. So right now we are in more than 1,410 shelters. We've been in so many for almost 80, 90 days at that number. So we know very well the situation of the shelters. Some of them are official, meaning running by the country or by the local state or the city. Others are used shelters that just happen on their own by people that open their home or their restaurant or their school and just happen. Those places, sometimes they have so many people living in them that they will not have a proper kitchen to feed so many people every day. So those places, we will need to give them hot meals to simplify the process of feeding such a high quantity of people. And we use the local infrastructure. Who is the best to feed people? Restaurants and chefs. So we use local restaurants, channeling the money that the American people has been supporting us with. We are 100% private financial. Every dollar we have spent in Ukraine comes from mainly Americans and other people around the world. We empower the local restaurant community who know their communities well, and we use those restaurants to cover the needs on those shelters, not only in Ukraine, but also in the other countries surrounding Ukraine. But then it's other places like north of Kyiv. I was on April 1st in Bucha. This was within hours of the Ukrainian army defending their country, taking over and start putting out, moving north and putting out the Russian troops. There we began arriving with hot food. But I went to Bucha recently, many weeks after, and the situation has changed dramatically. Some supermarkets has opened in the cities like Bucha and Irpin and Hostomel and Boderanka, but it's people without jobs. It's people that still are they're in shelters. In those places, we keep bringing hot meals, but now in rural areas, we realize that the absence of infrastructure, because the bridges are broken or other reasons, they don't have enough labor to reopen those supermarkets. We are bringing bags of food that they are roughly 15 kilos each, that equals around 20, 25 meals each, that we will deliver in those communities north of Kyiv every single week, once a week, to the hour in every location, covering the lack of infrastructure and supermarkets. This is two of the ways we've been doing it, on top of using the same trips to do the things, bring seeds to big farmers that bear well because lack of funding, or where because lack of infrastructure needed somebody to help them with seeds like sunflower and corn and wheat. But also is many Ukrainians that in front of the homes in the rural areas all across Ukraine. And now I've been almost all around Ukraine twice, 3 times. they will plant in front of their homes. And you can see right now, every single home planted with food that will be able to provide for those families in August, September. For us to do the hot meals, to do the bags of food for families, and then to be able to be giving seeds that they will convert into food that technically is like giving them money, is the three ways I believe the Ukrainian people in the short, mid, and long term are going to be needing our help until this war stops.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, but I would like to recognize my distinguished friend, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for any statements, any questions he might have. The gentleman is recognized. He'll have to unmute, though.
Okay, thank you again, Chef Andre, for being here. Obviously, this affects the food supply, both in Ukraine and globally. Have you seen Russia take any actions that you think are specifically designed to affect the import or export of food?
Obviously, I've not seen them physically seen any Russian stealing, but I've seen. I arrived to Ukraine on my last trip by boat. I went the Danube River from Romania up to Izmail, and I was able to experience firsthand all the difficulties that Ukraine is having, maybe to import goods and to import food, but also more important, to export grains. I know that this is because we see the blockade. I've been in Odessa. We've been with the governor of Odessa, the mayor of Odessa. We've seen missiles being hitting Odessa infrastructure continuously, Mykolaiv, hitting the ports. We understand that when they keep hitting grain silos, when they keep hitting train stations that are vital to be moving grain inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine, when they keep hitting ports directly, they are doing a huge damage, not only for Ukrainians to feed themselves, but we know that they're doing a huge damage to the more than 400 million people that we know the grain that Ukraine produces is able to feed. So this is a ways, obviously, I've seen how Russia, in a way, very directly is using this war to put an extra pressure around the world by creating famines in places that we should not have.
Okay. Are there specific areas of Ukraine where people are finding food is more difficult than others? Are there specific areas that you feel we really have a crisis in?
Obviously, in the places that the Russian troops kind of control for a period of time and then they left, they created a lot of destruction. I've seen myself in places like north of Kyiv, or in all the cities I mentioned before, and Bucha, and Irpin. The destruction there was real. Chernihiv, Kharkiv, where we are very active. We are in Kramatorsk, where one missile hit in the train station with more than 3,000 children and women waiting to escape the horrors of war. And we're nearby, we were feeding the people that were waiting for those trains that are vital to put them out. Obviously, in the south, I was in Zaporizhia only not too long ago, and Mykolaiv, only 25 kilometers. Those cities are 25 kilometers away from the front lines. In the moment you go and you get closer, within 5, 4, 3 kilometers, and you can sense even more what the war is doing to those communities that they are living there. And many people are going to say, why the people don't leave? When you have elderly people that they are sick and they cannot move, and the country is at war, and nobody can move them, or they don't want to leave because they feel they are too poor or too tired, and the only thing they have is that little house they work all their life. Those are the places that is becoming very difficult. We are listening. I was with the mayor of Mariupol only a few days ago, and obviously we understand the destruction in the city of Mariupol, but now we know that the city of Mariupol is going through a very big food and water crisis, with cholera cases increasing every day, with lack of food that Russians are not providing, with lack of clean water that Russians are not providing. Those are the areas that obviously we're going to need US and the international community to put pressure to make sure that we can also, even in the middle of the war, we can come in with humanitarian aid to make sure that those people, those populations are not going thirsty, are not going hungry, or even worse, are not dying because cholera and other situations because of the unhealthy conditions.
You must therefore talk to people who were in a Russian-occupied area, even though maybe the Russians are pushed out now. How does Russia treat the people when they are occupying their area?
I mentioned before I was in Bucha April 1st and April 2nd, and I think we all saw the horrors of the photos. I know what I saw with my own eyes, and obviously I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, of people that sometimes the only thing they wanted was a hug. The treatment of the Russian troops in the times that was interaction. I will tell you stories and even things I could say I saw with my own eyes of people that were shot from the back in their head only because they dared to leave their home, used to try to pick up bread of loaf if a bakery was still baking. Use the very simple thing of trying to feed your family became use an act of heroism. So obviously the stories are horrific in more ways than one, of shootings that they didn't need to happen, of civilians that they didn't need to die, of bombings of schools when families were trying to escape the horrors of war, where cars, which I saw with my own cars, are cars that they had very clearly the name of children in the top and in every side and the back of the cars. Those cars were totally full of holes that you could argue those were shots that Russian troops kept shooting at when used people were trying to go to the safety of their home. What I saw in those early days in the north of Kyiv, Bucha and Irpin, this is something obviously I'll never forget in my life, but the horrors are real, the horrors happen. And that's why it's very important we are there next to those people, making sure that in this case, food and water is now another one of the many problems they're going to be facing in the weeks and months ahead.
Okay. Are there any specific sorts of foods that you have a shortage of, or that there is a shortage of?
Well, it's certain. I want to make sure that the Ukrainian government is doing an amazing job. The Ukrainian governors, the Ukrainian people. You're going to say, if I would say why Central Kitchen needs to be there, or why we need to be helping them. Obviously, because they are at war, and we know that war is a very chaotic situation. We are trying to reopen some factories. We are trying to tell somebody, if you reopen these pasta factories, a country that what they have is a lot of wheat, will buy all the pasta from you. And things like this are happening. Kherson, that right now is under Russian occupation and is being under war, all that area south going east. We all know that they are big producers of things, for example, like onions, like tomatoes, etc., etc. Without those farmers having a normal farming season, those foods are going to be scarce. You could say, but we can feed the world without onions. Yes, totally agree. What Central Kitchen does is making sure that we use every single resource we have at our fingertips. We are bringing from the outside things that, because the war, are highly needed inside Ukraine. Like America will import a lot of foods that for some reason America is not able to produce. But overall, I would say that Ukraine is fine. We need to understand that the best way America and the international community can be helping Ukraine is not by bringing everything from the outside, but is making sure that we keep supporting the local economy, the local infrastructure, investing the money locally, creating jobs locally that will give Ukraine in the fighting for the freedom of their country, make sure that we invest into the solution, making sure that the entire economy doesn't collapse. That's why what World Central Kitchen is doing, supporting restaurants, buying from local farmers, buying from local factories that they can produce the foods that the people need.
Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the full committee chairwoman, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes for her questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chef Andre, for being with us this morning and for everything you and your team have done for the Ukrainian people and around the world to help other disaster victims. In your advocacy for vulnerable people that you serve, you have criticized how difficult it is for the international community to respond, and it is often too slow. And in a tweet you posted to celebrate President Biden's signing of a bill granting $40 billion in assistance to Ukraine, you said that the Ukrainian people, quote, can't wait months, quote, for help to arrive, and I agree completely. So what lessons have you learned during previous disasters that would let us help Ukrainians faster and more efficiently than we have today?
I think that big problems have very simple solutions. And sometimes we overcomplicate things. I think, we went in, we created a big team. We have more than 4,000 or 5,000 people in our network of people that are working with World Central Kitchen. That this is what allows us to be fast and adapting. Adapting is that when we make those bags that we send to the communities, because we go every day. I mean, I've been there more than 55 days of my life. I've been 106 days on this crisis, but I've been inside Ukraine, especially in the early days. But again, I just came back 3-4 days ago after another round of 12 days. By being there in real time, you are able just to adapt in real time. If somebody's telling you, hey, Jose, another organization just brought a lot of pasta. We got pasta for 2 months. We are able the next week to take any pasta we had in those packages and redeliver maybe with more fruits and vegetables, increasing the output of fruits and vegetables that more often than not we are buying local. But now what I will say is that for food, World Central Kitchen, we are with 3,970 distribution points. 3,900 distribution points. With this, I only want to say, quite frankly, very humbly, but at the same time, very proud that we know what's going on. We know what the people need because we're talking with them every single day. So for food, what I will say is that now I'm afraid that we are going to be multiplying efforts by now more organizations finally arriving and everybody bringing food because they are doing something. And sometimes I will say that more doesn't equal better. The right amount equals better because we cannot collapse the local economies by giving too much food for free at the same time. We need to be very specific. I've been talking to mayors like in Mykolaiv that their concern was, how do we know that we are not breaking and collapsing the local economy? Well, you could argue too that those mayors need to know that their people are out of jobs and sometimes banks are not open or sometimes people don't have ATM, so they need cash. So that's what we are covering. But it's very important that the solutions and the actions don't happen. You don't make a decision today for 6 months from now, but that you in emergencies are day to day assessing the situation. So you know when the people need the help and you know when you need to start moving out.
Well, since the war began more than 3 months ago, have you observed any improvements and what obstacles remain?
Well, improvements, there have been many in all the cities that they've been reconquered by the Ukrainian troops and the Ukrainian government, like in Irpin and Bucha. Supermarkets are open again. Some of those breaches are already fixed. Life seems in many parts of Kyiv is back to normal. But then in that same city, they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that they are displaced, living in different refugee camps. Those are the challenges. The challenges is that those people are going to need our help. I mean, again, is close to 14 million people between displaced internally in Ukraine and refugees outside Ukraine. Many of those people are going to be needing all the help they can get. And we're going to have to be creative. Do we give them cards so they can buy their own food? Maybe that's another great idea. I know World Food Program is trying to put that program already for a few weeks. So the challenges we are facing is adapting to the situation as cities are being retaken by the Ukrainian government, going very quickly in those cities to provide very quick support with food and water to those communities, but then watching closely so we can keep adapting as this war progresses, because the solutions of today will not be the same ones that the people need a month from now. So it's imperative that the solutions given are always reestablished in the weeks ahead.
Well, my final question is that we prioritize on this committee ensuring that taxpayers' dollars are being spent responsibly in a way that Congress intended. Sometimes the bureaucracy can get in the way. Mr. Andres, what specifically could the U.S. do to help improve how humanitarian aid is being delivered while still ensuring assistance is going where it is most needed?
So World Central Kitchen right now is fully funded for this operation with private money from Americans, individuals, some foundations. We're spending between 1.5 and $2.5–3 million a day. Depends the day. It's not the same on Monday than a Sunday. No, it's not the same the day we're filling up our warehouses than a Sunday. That day maybe we don't have the trains or the buses, the trucks delivering. But I do believe that it's very important that we don't double up and that also we move quick in establishing those funds. I come from the private sector. I don't work for World Central Kitchen. I'm just the founder and I am a volunteer of World Central Kitchen. What we need to trying to make sure is that the decisions that they are already proven, that are working on the ground, that are supported. Don't try just to support new things of new NGOs that want to come and establish themselves over 100 days later when they didn't have real knowledge of what was going in the war in the early days. So this is going to be very important. I don't believe that we can work by committee. Sometimes, with all due respect, especially in emergencies and especially with food, when you work by committee, that means that everybody's in charge. When everybody's in charge means that nobody's in charge. And therefore, you keep throwing money at the problem. I do believe that World Central Kitchen has proven itself that has done a very quick, fast, and effective job to be in those places and adapting to the situation, throwing out the plans and adapting day to day. I do believe that the great people of USAID, I know many of them, I've been with Ambassador Power on the ground in Poland, I know the places. I do believe what they need to do is just change the way they are able to make the decisions, to what organizations they support, and how quickly that money can be flowing. Big problems have very simple solutions. This is not my organization. This is not World Central Kitchen organization. This is an organization actually of the American people. And I could argue an organization of the people of the world. We are here to be your organization to bring quick and fast delivery of food humanitarian assistance in the middle of a war. In this case, it's our first time, but the lessons in the last 107 days, they've been big. We've done our masters. We've proven that we can be adapting quicker and faster than anybody.
Thank you. And we in Congress continue to work to ensure Ukraine has the security and humanitarian assistance it needs to defend against Russia's illegal war. We must always push to get that assistance out the door as quickly and as responsibly as possible. You are doing a fantastic job. Thank you so much. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, for 5 minutes. All right. I think she may have stepped away from her screen. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch, for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynch, and I also want to thank Mr. Grothman for this hearing. Chef Andres, it's unusual for us in this committee, actually in Congress, to have before us somebody who has a long record of success and commitment to addressing hunger issues and who has such practical knowledge. There are a couple of things that you said I want to just give you an opportunity to elaborate on. Number one, the buy local, do everything we can in the effort to address the nutrition and hunger issues in Ukraine is enhanced, as I hear you, the more we do to rebuild their local agricultural economy. And then secondly, on a practical level, can you just describe what the effects of what's happening in Ukraine and how that affects both fertilizer production in the export of fertilizer, in the export of grain to other countries around the world. Because I think as we address the issues of hunger in Ukraine, we have to be mindful that what's happening in Ukraine is compounding the issues of hunger elsewhere. So I just want to turn this over to you. And also, I want to express to you my gratitude, which I think we all share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question. I'm not going to use an example of Ukraine, but I've been more than 30 years of my life trying to be part of the solution, not only cooking for the few, but cooking for the many and learning. And I began here in Washington, D.C., where actually the Senate over 28 years ago had a hunger caucus right at that DC Central Kitchen, that soup kitchen. I was able to work. So my life learning is not being used in universities. I never graduated. It's being used being there and watching and listening to experts, or learning on my own, listening to the people. I'm going to give you the example of Haiti. I was very proud of how U.S. responded to the Haiti earthquake in 2010. If anything, America should be very proud of the aid we gave to those citizens in Port-au-Prince. It was a massive aid given, and forever as an American, I was proud to see. Other thing is how we use the money and if we were effective, but this is going to be life itself. We always need to work to try to keep doing more of what we do well and trying to prove what we didn't do so well. But one of the things I really followed fairly closely was, I understand that if a country, in this case America, is giving aid, you will argue that if you're giving food aid, that money that this American taxpayer makes sense that you are spending that money to buy from local American farmers. Well, frankly, every country probably should do exactly the same. All of this is perfectly fine. But the issue we have is that then in the process of trying to help, we don't think in a 360-degree way, and we create other problems. By America and the international community giving so much food for free into Haiti in the weeks and months after the earthquake, in the process, we gave a lot of rice. Northern of Port-au-Prince is an area that is a rice-producing area. Those rice producers, nobody was buying the rice from them. Why? Because the huge amounts of rice were given to free. Actually, so much food was being given in Port-au-Prince that we created migrations internally to Haiti because people were flowing from places with no food to Port-au-Prince that they were giving you free food. This is a reality, and this happened, and I was part of seeing it. I can guarantee you, even I didn't spend any time, and I know I'm under oath, I'm giving you use my honest personal opinion by following those things through years. We've been feeding Haitians in shelters in Tijuana. Some of these Haitians began migrating in 2010 after many of them lose jobs in rural areas because they couldn't sell the rice and other food products. In a way of us helping Haiti, we created other problems by not thinking that. That's why I'm always suggesting that we need to find better balance. If you want to be helping a hungry country, in the process of feeding them, we may be already investing in having a better migration, having less migration issues in the southern border. If we just keep throwing money at the problem, that in this case is feeding the people that are hungry today, but in the process, we create all the problems that then puts pressure in the border, in the South, with people that lost their jobs 10 years before, and there they are knocking on the doors of America. That's why is one of the many other reasons we need to start thinking better of why it's better to invest money in those countries we are trying to help versus use throwing them so much food that we create problems of logistics because the airports and the ports are overwhelmed, problems. Again, I mentioned before, it's very absurd to me that World Food Program is bringing food into Ukraine when at the same time World Food Program is saying that we need to find ways to export food out of Ukraine. If we have food inside Ukraine, why we don't buy that food? And why we don't put that food that World Food Program is trying to bring in, send it to Syria, send it to Ethiopia, send it to the countries that need the food right now? you are solving a lot of logistical problems, but not putting more pressure. So I think this one is the one I will say is the most important. And I do believe we need to put factories up and running inside Ukraine. The ones that closed at the beginning of, or the markets that anything we can do to open those is better in the best national security of Ukraine. In the process of helping Ukrainians with humanitarian aid, we're multiplying every dollar America may give because we create jobs. We put Ukrainians to be able to feed themselves because the logistics. But again, they have the food internally. I've seen the silos. Remember, I've been is one place inside, I forgot the name, in the middle of Ukraine. They have a very huge flag. They claim is the biggest, is the center of Ukraine. There is this factory we began partnering with. They do seeds. We began helping distribute those seeds to the farmers. They didn't have any cash away to buy it themselves. So again, the logistics is what is important. Ukraine has food to feed itself, but we need to remember they are at war. It's not a country is going to have famine for lack of food. It's a country that needs our support with logistics and spending, investing the money in the right places to make sure that food doesn't become a problem.
Thank you very, very much. I yield back.
The gentleman
Very
yields
helpful.
back. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. Great questions and very helpful answer. Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, neither I nor my staff understood the organization of this panel this morning. I am prepared to ask questions of Mr. Graham, but we did not understand how you were doing this morning. In fact, when you started, I tried to find out. My staff said, hold off. And so I'm prepared to ask questions of Mr. Graham. I thank Chef Andres for his work and for his insights. And I think that he is absolutely right to be talking about how we can help build the economy of any country that is in stress like this. But I thank him for his work, and I'm ready for the next panel.
Okay, I do appreciate that. We did struggle with different time zones. Several of our witnesses are in different time zones, so we were trying to accommodate everyone. But let me just add my thanks to Chef Andre for his great work and his testimony here this morning. This was very, very helpful. If other members have any questions for Chef Andre, we will take those into the record and we will try to deliver those to Chef Andre and get further answers on those questions. But at this point, I think we will transfer to the next panel. I want to excuse Chef Andre and thank him for his testimony and his good work. God bless you. Please stay safe. I know you're operating in some pretty dangerous areas, and we just appreciate the work that you and your organizations are doing for people that we care about very deeply. And I think you present the presence of the United States in a very favorable way, and we appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to reset.